Dan Santos, Director of Public Works. With me tonight is Assistant Director Rob Steen, and I'd like to introduce our newest employee, our new Assistant Town Engineer, Amanda Ruggiero, who's joined us tonight. And you know how hard Roger works and how much help he needs, so Amanda is going to be his right-hand person. And she's already started out doing a lot of good work in the couple of weeks she's been here. So we had committed to you all earlier this year, after we had the blizzards and the snow that went on, that we would review the snow and ice procedures and policies and how we operate. And what I'd like to do is share with you the results of that review. And we have a number of slides here to.
Just turn the power on the side.
Okay. As me. Yes. Okay. Thank you. As a just a means of just a little brief background, not that anyone can ever forget this, that this is an enormous town. We have over 62 square miles of land area, and DPW is responsible for approximately 1,800 roads, and that includes snow plowing of those roads, about 450 miles, and 54 parking lots, 90 miles of sidewalks, and 4 miles of bike path. And of those roads, for our snow and ice purposes, 30% of those are considered main roads, which typically require the larger equipment, and we use salt on those as part of our program, and then 70% are considered secondary roads. Just so, if we go back to the winter, you may recall that in November and December and January, it was a great winter and it was easy going. We didn't have a lot going on with snow, and then this is actually true. People were really saying this. Is it going to snow this year? We may not spend our budget. Well, then Juno hit. And as you can see here, I have, lest you forget, I have a few slides here just to show us and bring us back to that nightmare, which was really a calamity. I mean, it was a major, major storm to impact this community and this region. This is our parking lot at DPW. That's the same exact view, if you didn't see that on the right and left. We couldn't even see, 20 yards into the parking lot. This is at the height of Juno, January 27th. This is Main Street in Hyannis. I mean, you forget how high that snow was. Well, we think about this every day. This, again, Hyannis. Well, this really sets the stage for the work that we've done, and I think we've made a lot of progress. And the last picture here is Calmus Beach. That's a portion of the 15,000 cubic yard pile of snow that we removed from Main Street, Hyannis. So we undertook a comprehensive review of our snow and ice program. We started that basically right at the conclusion of the snow, when we could finish putting the plows away and get the folks around a table and start thinking about this, and include the highest levels of management in our department, including myself and the other folks you see here that participated and that are very aware of how the system works, how snow and ice works over the years. A lot of years of experience there. And you can see, as we say here, we had 10 meetings over 6 months with 150 hours of time invested. So look at the major topics that we undertook in our comprehensive review. We started with the lessons learned. What worked well, what worked poorly, and what needs improvement. And we spent a lot of time brainstorming and looking at those things. We reviewed the standards of service. What that is basically is our policy document, which provides the expectation of how we're going to respond to storms. And it's for you, it's for all our residents and visitors and businesses. It's what the expectation is. And I think one of the things that we need to do is let people know better what those expectations are. And we've re-established that as part of this. We've reviewed a private road maintenance standard. We reviewed our management practices. These are the internal things that we do as part of our snow and ice program. And you can see here that it includes many things, just how we organize and consider roads, what we call them and how we treat them, the use of GPS, our inspectors, how we staff our emergency response center, and that's where we, the headquarters of during the snowstorm. Plowing practices, snow removals, those are under best management, reviewing the management practices. SOP, standard operating procedure items, considering parking bans and how damage is addressed from plows, from our own plows, from contractors. And communications, obviously, very significant aspect of our snow and ice program, and how really determines in a large part the success of the program. And we'll talk about that as we move along here. And then we reviewed our equipment use, and that's all of the equipment that we have and how we deploy it, and then the new use of snow fighters and that program that we've talked to you about over the last 2 years, and bringing that up to speed. So the results of that comprehensive review, there are a number of things, and I'll touch on some of them and get into more detail on others. And we've developed a new standards of service. We developed a private road maintenance standard, which is still under review internally, and I would love to get your input either through your roads committee or other way in the future when we're ready to share that. But this relates to the standards that the private roads need to be at for us to be able to plow them. And if you have read the Cape Cod Times recently, you'll see that a number of towns publish this, and they go out and they review their private roads, and if you don't meet a certain standard, then you're asked to bring it up to a standard in order for us to plow. Because we get a lot of damage, we waste a lot of time on a number of our roads that are private roads that really shouldn't be plowed, and it's for a variety of reasons. We, as we've discussed with you at the last couple of meetings, research and selected a GPS automatic vehicle location system, which we'll be deploying soon. We're creating standards for defining what a main and secondary road is and whether or not those should remain the way they are. They've been that way a long time, and we've found in our review that there are certain roads that probably should be considered main roads, and others that we wonder why they're main roads and maybe they should be secondary roads. So we've looked at that. Reorganizing our staff and who we have on staff in the emergency response center during certain types of storms, beefing that up, training, and I think we'll go a long way towards better managing our storms with that focus. Beefing up our truck fleet. Again, within existing budgets. We have gotten good budgets for our vehicle operating capital over the past few years, and not only with this, but in all of this whole approach, we want to maximize the efficiency of the resources we have. That's our people, our funds, and our equipment. And this, I think, really does do that in some of the conclusions that we've come to in our review here. Addressing secondary contractor reliability, we spoke to you about that in the fall. Last spring when we met to go over the response to Storm Juno, and we found a lot of issues over the last 2 years with contractor reliability, and we've made some changes in be able to improve that. And then crew rest issues. This is something that all towns wrestle with, and frankly, they kind of look the other way. They got to get the snow plowed, and you get drivers driving for hours and hours and up to days, and it's just not acceptable, and we're really struggling with ways to improve that. And we have some ways, not only with our people, but with our contractors, so that we're providing a safe environment while we're getting the job done. So as part of that, we've rewritten the contractor package. This is the contract we have with our contractors, looking at the standards, what we require of them for the job, for their equipment, the compensation that we will be providing them. We have recently increased our rates to meet basically the state rates for snowplow contractors. We felt like that would be an attraction to bring people to Barnstable that may not have been before, because they could make money by going to Plymouth or Taunton, but you know, why not stay in your backyard and make the same amount of money? We've included GPS, as you know, with the contractor vehicles as well, so they'll be part of that contract is making sure they're aware of that, and they're signing on to have a GPS unit in their vehicle, and this work has been completed. Internally, and how we plow, and we got down to this level is, you know, sometimes you see on the highway where multiple plows will operate, and you know, we weren't making our best use of these gangs of plows, and we've shifted around how we're doing that. And instead of having the lead truck being the big truck with the sander, we put that in the back to clean up the rest. With the smaller trucks behind the big truck, they couldn't move what the big truck was putting on the side of the road. So that's the kind of level of thinking that went into this and brainstorming, and I think these will make, again, big differences. Our equipment, we've looked a lot at our equipment and how we use it, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. We are creating a training program for not only our drivers and our folks, but we're going to have training for our contractors and informational sessions, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and we don't just get contractors that come in that think they know how to plow. Some of them do a great job, some think they do a great job, and they don't. But we want to have a standard for our contractors as well. And then finally looking at material storage, and basically that's our salt and sand, but primarily salt. And we're looking at that, and we'll continue to do that. So what I'd like to do is talk about the standard of service, because this is where, as I mentioned a few moments ago, it's important that you know and our residents know what to expect during what type of storm. And in the past, we had a standard of service that said basically typical storm is 8 to 12 inches, and we will within 8 hours clear the primary roads and 16 hours clear the secondary roads. And what that meant was remove the snow to a depth and width enough that it was passable. And it's, you know, short and concise, but it really didn't address the reality of what various storms bring. So we made 3 categories, and they're going to be A, B, and C. And those are based on the accumulation, the rate of snow, and then how the equipment responds during those storms. So Category A would be considered the normal storm, or what we typically see here and what our previous standards of service was really responding to. Category B is when we're focusing our efforts on main roads because the conditions are such that that's all we can be effective at. And then Category C, which we would have categorized Juneau as, it's that calamitous storm where we're basically just trying to keep open the routes to the hospital and to provide response to police and fire. And there is some detail here, and I just feel like I need to go through it, and I'm going to go through it, and we'll keep saying this, and we want to get this out as much as we can. But in a Category A storm, this is the normal storm, we're expecting accumulations of 2 to 18 inches, which are over a 24-hour period, where we have less than an inch or an hour of accumulation. That's really when things get messy and difficult, when we start exceeding an inch per hour of accumulation. We felt like that was really the break point. And in the Category A storm, this is the service and the goals that we'd be working towards, which is similar to our previous standards, which the main roads cleared within 8 hours after the precipitation ends, secondary roads 16 hours after the precipitation ends, and sidewalks, bike paths begin 48 hours after the end of the storm. And by the way, some sidewalks are, like in Main Street, Hyannis, they are addressed and dealt with at the same time as the snow plowing. and snow removal from business districts. And what we mean there, snow removal, is when we actually pick up the snow and take it to Calamus Beach or other places around town, which we had to do when the snow is at such depth that it really impedes any use of the sidewalks or the area for pedestrians. Now, Category B, and the relating it to equipment, this is where the 1-ton pickup trucks with plows and the smaller trucks are no longer effective. And that's a condition where there's 18 to 24 inches of accumulation over approximately 24 hours, again, with snowfalls 1 inch per hour or less. But this is much deeper snow and where there's limited effectiveness by certain equipment. So under this condition, we would prioritize our efforts, and the main roads we would continue to plow as normal, although the time to clear them would take longer than the 8 hours of the normal storm, and could be up to 24 hours. We will, under this scenario, shift resources. Currently, under the normal storm, we have our loaders and backhoes in parking lots, and many of those are school parking lots, because under that normal storm, school will typically still be open. So we have to make sure that the areas around the schools and the parking lots are clear. But in this level of storm, it's unlikely that there's going to be school. So we're shifting those assets. We learned that in Juneau, and in fact, as we're going along, we realized we have roads that aren't cleared, but we're clearing parking lots, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. So in this level of storm and in the sea, we're going to shift those assets to the roads. And when we're done with the roads, we'll get them to the parking lots. Secondary roads, we're going to prioritize based on basically how many people they serve. And we're looking at this now. If there's roads with one house or two houses on a cul-de-sac versus a subdivision road with hundreds of homes, we're going to prioritize based on that. And then the first shot at those secondary roads will be basically just pass in and out to make sure there's emergency access. And we will work after that on pushing back the corners, making it curb to curb, and we suggest here that that would be up to 48 hours after the storm, that we'd have all of that done. But the goal would be to get in and out and have access for emergency vehicles. Hard pack, this is the hard pack snow and ice, which was really the bane of last winter. Once it's there, particularly on the secondary roads, and its presence is because we don't salt those roads. And once the snow packs down, that's there, as you found out. And I get many calls from residents and you all about what are we going to do about the hard pack. And at the end, it took getting loaders out and going down every road with a loader and scraping and lifting it off. So. But in these conditions, we're going to see some hard pack. And then we have not done this in the past, and we're going to be looking towards parking bans in certain areas just to help us get the job done. If the car's not there, and you see this in the larger cities, but Barnstable by size and the roads in our downtown areas, it's city-like, and so we should be able to get that job done more efficiently as well. And then finally, the Category C, this is the whopper. This is the very infrequent storm. Juneau was, as the Cape Cod Times said, a 100-year storm. The last big one, which this is claimed to have exceeded, was 2005. So they're not very frequent, but we still think that people should know what to expect from their Department of Public Works in their town when you have the big one. And if anything, it's a planning exercise for us to be able to better respond to the big storm by thinking about it, by having a plan, and rather than just on the fly, what are we going to do now, and working through it that way. So this is when you get accumulations greater than 24 inches, 24, 30, 36 inches we've seen here on the Cape in some storms, including Juneau. And then this is where the accumulation rate is greater than 1 inch per hour, that's really snowing. That's a blizzard. And then because of the whiteout conditions, it's obviously that we can't get a lot done during those conditions, and it's just the largest equipment. And you can see here at the top where even the six-wheelers aren't effective. And at the height of Juneau, the only thing that was effective was 10-wheelers, which we have one ourselves. We had contractors and front-end loaders. But all of our other equipment was just parked because it was getting stuck and couldn't move the snow. And the priorities here, obviously, is given to the hospital routes, assisting police and fire. We have worked closely with and will continue to work with county emergency response personnel. There's been meetings with the local towns, including Yarmouth and the county, to address this issue, make sure that as a region, we are focusing on the right roads to get people where they need to get, the police station, fire stations, to the hospital, and that is the priority. And we work with the county emergency response personnel as well as our own fire and police personnel on the planning and during the storms. For the remainder of the roads, the priority is going to be given to the largest, busiest, so Route 132 and West Main Street and the other roads that are main, and then we would work on those, keeping them clear and keep working at those, because when you're in a blizzard and you get a lot of wind and drifting, you're plowing and it's coming back behind you, and you have to keep going over those, and we will continue to do that to keep those main roads clear. Then we would move to the less busy main roads, and as I mentioned with the Category B, we'd obviously be using the loaders and parking lot and sidewalk and any and all equipment on roads rather than on parking lots and things that won't matter at that time. Secondary roads and the smaller mains will be left until all those mains are taken care of, as I mentioned. And then, again, we're going to see hard pack, similar to Category B. When we do the secondary roads, it's going to be a pass-in for emergency access, and then work at cleaning those up. You know, the 2 lanes on the 2-lane roads, pushing back the corners, and just doing the cleanup work we do. And that could take up to 4 days to get all that work done. And then we would also be looking for parking bans during this level of snow emergency. And then snow removal from the business districts would be delayed, obviously, until we had the roads cleared. And just a little more specificity on some of the items that we looked at. The GPS, but I think it warrants repeat that, we're using, as you can see up, I'm not afraid to push the button. Well, the top left is the current Emergency Response Center map, where we're using stick-it notes and magnets and radios, and the bottom lower, this is what we're basically going to have in our Emergency Response Center, a large smart board that's interactive, that gives us all the information about where all of our equipment is in the storm, and not only that, but where it's been. And you can see on the right side, the top graphic there showing all the pieces of equipment in that particular town, and then on the bottom, that's an example of over time where one particular piece of equipment went. And ultimately, the goal of this is knowing what streets have or have not been plowed in what interval, what's been missed, and to better manage how we handle the storm. And I think we're very excited about it. You've approved the appropriation for it. We have a contract signed, and we're hoping to get at least the initial implementation of this this year, and to give it a good tryout. So the longer the snow waits, the more we'll have implemented this year with the GPS vehicle location system. As far as equipment, I mentioned snow fighters. This is our term for the large equipment with plows and spreaders that we're using to fight the storm. And you can see on the top right photograph there, that's a new snow fighter that we just acquired. That's an Oshkosh plow. These are the cream of the crop for plowing. This is what's used out in Minnesota and on airports, and you don't stop these. The beauty is, with our snow fighter concept, is we're stretching our budgets by buying used equipment because we found that we take new equipment and we put salt on it and run it with the salt and the sanders, and we're destroying these trucks in almost half the life of what we should get out of them. So what we've done is a program to buy used equipment, good, solid used equipment that will serve us not as long as a new piece of equipment, but maybe 8 years rather than a new piece being ruined in 12, we can get 20 years out of. So, for example, this Oshkosh, this is a $300,000 piece of equipment that we paid $80,000 for, and it has 40,000 miles on it. So these kind of equipment is going to allow us to get more equipment and better equipment, and it'd be dedicated to snow and ice removal. So this truck, this allows the trucks we buy new to be used as construction vehicles, and they're ready for that purpose, and they'll last longer. Loaders, we have had few loaders, and what we've done here is you've approved the purchase of loaders at solid waste, and for our operation over the past couple of years, typically we would trade those in. We're not trading them in. They're functional, certainly enough for snow and ice. So the goal here is that we have loaders out in the field during storms so that each inspector has access to a loader. So when they have trouble on a particular road, that inspector's working with a loader operator and their contractors and our staff as a team to take care of their routes. And we've done this when we pulled the loaders out of the parking lots in schools during Juneau. This is what we had them do, and it was a very effective way to get snow removal done in the best manner. So we're going to make that a permanent part of our operation. We've brought in more contractors with larger trucks for our main routes, our spreading, salting, and plowing, and where we had our folks doing that in the past, we're moving them into the secondary roads and have them available to make sure that we have coverage. With the problems we've had with secondary contractors and reliability, we had to rely more and more on our folks, and so this allows us to do that and not take them from the mains, because the mains will now be covered by contractors. Communications. As I tell my staff, we need to over-communicate, and I think in this situation, clearly, that's never a bad thing. And these are some of the things that we either do or will be doing, and we're open to any and other ideas for communicating with you all and with the public. Last year, we started using social media, and we rely on Lynn Poyant does a great job. We send her what we need to put out, and it gets everywhere that I can see. You can see the website banner on the right. This is an example of during Juneau, what we put on the town's website, and we would do this every 6 hours, every 12 hours, whenever it made sense that things changed, that people could go to the website and get the latest. Email updates to the town manager, who I think would then get them to you in the past, and we can have that more of a rigorous system. Where we'd like to implement a call-in message where, for those folks that don't have email or access to a computer, but they have a phone, that they can call a number and get this information read to them on basically an answering machine. The application of reverse 911 where appropriate. I think that'll depend on the storm and the conditions is when we'd use that, but it is available to us. And if there's parking bans or travel bans and things like that you want to get out to all residents, then we would certainly have that available and plan to use that. We use the radio by sending out press releases. We send all our information to them, and we rely on interviews, and we try to get them to get our information out to those listening to the radio. We have our own Channel 18, which is a great resource for reporting and just for putting information up that scrolls throughout the day that are watching that. And then finally, with the GPS, there'll be the opportunity for real-time viewing in that citizens can go onto the town website, and there'll be a link to our GPS system, and they can see just what we're seeing, what's been plowed, what hasn't been plowed, or if they haven't been plowed, they'll say, okay, there's a plow 3 streets over, and it's going to get to me eventually. And I think providing more information is going to make people feel a lot better, particularly in these bad storms where they don't know what's going on. And I get the calls like you did, and I can appreciate that. It's a difficult situation. A lot of elderly in our population, and they're very scared during those events. So the more we can do to inform them, let them know what they can expect, I think the better all around. And then finally, material storage. This is we use salt pretty much exclusively, and as time goes on in the industry, we've learned that sand is useless in dealing with snow. It just goes off the road. It doesn't melt the snow. It really doesn't do anything. We used it because we don't have the capacity to salt all our secondary roads. Now we're looking closely at that. I think ultimately, we'd like to get to that point so that we're treating in the worst storms, we're treating our secondary roads as we are the mains, because treating with salt is a very effective means to keep the snow from sticking to the road, and it allows us to keep up. So there's, the issues basically there are, how do we have enough salt to do that, and equipment to do that? And we're looking at some options. You can build a salt shed, and a lot of people have said, well, you have to store salt inside. Well, the fact is, you don't really have to do that. They prefer that, the state prefers that, because salt is chloride, and it's not the greatest thing to have in around ponds and streams and in drinking water, but it can be managed. So we spend a lot of time, our engineer Clay Schofield's looking at this, at how we can do uncovered storage, or not in a building. We can do covered storage with tarps and have particular pads and collect the runoff. And so that's something that we want to look at the future, is having more ability for salt, so that we can not only salt at the beginning of a storm, but continue to salt through the storm, because that is a very effective means of keeping the roads clear, and then get to the point where we're doing that on secondary roads as well. And then finally, I know that Councilor Kennedy's going to be out of work, so we developed a new snow plow just for her. Well, no, it'll be something that you can help us with this winter, and there's the Ann Kennedy snow plow. Yes. So, after all that, I'll open it up to any questions you might have, and go from there.
Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate that. As much as we don't like to hear about snow and ice, it's important that we know this information. I had a question about the state coordination. I know last year the state, and correct me if I'm wrong, but state's responsible for a certain portion of our roads, and yet they kind of abandoned us in the middle of Juneau to go up and take care of the state highway. How is that coordinated? I mean, are we going to be left in the lurch with a category, C storm or B storm again?
Well, I hope not, and they have been involved. I mentioned we're working with the county and the public safety agencies. The state's involved in that as well, and they're aware of the necessity of keeping Willow Street open, 28 open, and particularly in the area of the airport where they really failed last year. But in our planning, we're going to make sure that we're able to do it if they can't. So we're the fallback. If it's not happening, we're going to be ready to step in and do it, and we're not going to wait for them to show up and not like they did last time.
I also think it's excellent that you impose parking bans and travel restrictions. I think that was a savior for many people during Juneau, but it didn't. It needs to happen more often. So, Councilor, questions? Will Crocker, Councilor Crocker.
Thank you, Dan. For that presentation. I would like to have you come before the Roads Committee as soon as possible before the snow starts falling, and to talk about some of the things that you just suggested. The standards regarding private roads and that kind of being a evolving paradigm, and how the town how you look at that. And also, if you could, and I'll get in touch with you about this later, but if you could bring copies of this presentation with you, that would be great, because I think...
I have them here.
Okay, well, there you go. That much easier. I am very much looking forward to the GPS and the real-time viewing. I think that will make a lot of people in this town feel a lot more comfortable. Thank you, Councilor, that's the good word. Because people do feel closed in and maybe a little bit helpless when we get category storms like Juneau. They don't know what's going on. They hear some things, they don't hear some things. But I think the more, again, as you say, to echo what you said, the more information we can get out to the public, the less closed in and helpless they feel about it. And if the real-time viewing, be able to log into the town's website to be able to see, yeah, there's a couple, the crew is working two streets over, and they're going to get to me. That information is key. So I look forward to being able to see you guys come at our next meeting again.
Great.
Hopefully
Happy to do
long
it.
before the snow starts falling.
Great.
Councilor
We're
Cullen.
ready.
I thought you didn't like roads.
I don't like roads, but I do like to talk about this one issue, which is that during Juneau, I think there were over 100 cars that were abandoned on 132 and other routes and roads that we had. And when Chief came up and told us what happened, and you came up and told us what happened, there were a few of us up here that said we really feel that those people should be ticketed and towed. And for avoiding the travel advisories, they should be towed and they should be charged the maximum amount. And I just want to make sure that that was heard, because the thought of people needing care at the hospital and not being able to get through the roads because of abandoned vehicles is just too much to bear. So I just wanted to mention that again, because last winter I was very upset about that, and I know a lot of people were up here. Thank you.
The PD was extremely responsive when we pointed out they needed to move a vehicle. They got it done. I think the chief mentioned they towed more vehicles than they ever have during that storm. And when push came to shove, literally, if we need to get a vehicle out of the way, we very carefully and very gingerly took a loader and moved it out of the way. And it wasn't many, but we did do that, and we will do that if we have to.
The point is that they should be fined, because we shouldn't be wasting our resources moving vehicles when there's been a travel advisory in town. So I appreciate the efforts. It's not that I don't. I just don't think we should have to be doing that. So if we do have to do that, I think that they should pay for it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Norman.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dan, for all the work your staff has done to address a lot of these issues. Just 3 points I want to make. You talked about, moving the bigger vehicle into the gutter because it makes sense. It's pushing the most snow. As someone who's driven for many years, I can tell you, you're going to get resistance from the contractors, because what I would end up doing is, as the snow starts to accumulate on the trees, your canopy starts to close in on you. So you actually reverse it, so the bigger truck is in the middle of the road because that's the highest point of the canopy, and we shove the smaller guys into the gutter, because otherwise we're wiping out $500 mirrors and lights and cracked windshields and everything else. So tree trimming could also be part of this preparation, because that's what's going to happen with that policy, is you're going to get resistance from the contractors, because there's nothing more frustrating than going out working 12 hours, earning about $1,200, deduct fuel, deduct the pay for the driver, and then you also have to replace a $400 or $500 mirror and lights and everything else. So that's just an issue you should probably take a little bit closer look at for the contractors.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you.
Second issue is, I mentioned it before, was tire chains. Now, in the state of Massachusetts, tire chains are legal from November 1st to June 30th in snow emergencies. And a lot of the vehicles under your Plan B size storm would still be usable with that traction. I know myself, when I was out in Juneau and I was assigned to a crew, that the traction was the biggest issue. It wasn't the size of the machine, because you can have the biggest loader in town, and if it's on ice, it's just going to spin its wheels. I mean, if anybody gone to a hockey game and see a Zamboni, if they didn't have the studded tires, they'd turn a corner and just keep going. So, I think you should look again at that and get a supply of tire chains. I remember the blizzard of '78. My dad had an old Country Squire station wagon, and he put chains on the two-wheel drive and put a bunch of cement blocks in the back seat there, and I mean, he was going around delivering milk and bread and picking up people. It just couldn't stop it. So it's traction that's the issue. It's not so much the size of the vehicle. It's what's the tires spinning. What is it doing? So it might be a good investment, because you can turn a small 1-ton dump truck into effectively a 10-wheeler with traction. Secondly, you should look at is V-plows, encouraging contractors, and maybe in your future purchases, is when you set up a new vehicle, is try to get those articulating V-plows that can go straight, left, right, or V. Because what you'll find is that when you're trying to push a lot of weight, the front end of the vehicle actually starts to slide away from the V. So if you've got your angle over to the right, and we've all seen it after every snowstorm, you see the people that don't have a lot of experience plowing, and you'll see that their driver's side door or their passenger door is stoved in. And what's happened is they've plowed into a pile of snow all the way angled over, and it just throws you 90 degrees to the left or the right, depending on which it's playing. Whereas if you have a V, it's equal balance of weight distribution, so you can just nose into a road that's got 2 or 3 feet of snow on it, or wind drifts up to 4 or 5 feet, and you can still get through it because you're not shoved or forced off your track. So those are the only 3 observations I had. It was a lot of these ideas I think are good ideas and are going to help, in a lot of these situations, especially with the GPS tracking and being able to see where your assets are, where they can be reallocated to, the problem areas in the town. So thank your staff for all they've done, and, maybe just take some of these suggestions.
Absolutely. My team continues to meet, and I'll make sure that we address those, and we'll get back to you or implement them or whatever's best.
Vice President Kennedy.
I have a couple of things. One, I noticed that you have advertised for contractors, and you've advertised that you're paying the same rate as the state, and that there's also an incentive for them to sign up by November
15th.
15th. Have you gotten good response?
Yes.
Good.
We're getting a lot of response, and we really try to put a blitz out there and let people know we want qualified contractors. We're going to pay you well, and this is a good place to do your business. And we've got, I don't know if you've been on 28 by my office, but we have a big one of the variable message signs saying, like the state does on Route 3 and 495, plow contractors wanted. And we're putting ads in the newspaper and Facebook, and so we're getting the word out, and we're getting definitely a good response.
Good. My second thing is just to let you and the public know that I am going to continue my newsletter to a certain degree through the Civic Association in Barnstable. So some of this information would be probably helpful to continue our communication with each other, because it was very helpful to have that outlet during the storms, according to our constituents. So that was my second issue. My third one is, when can I pick up my bike? I need to start working on my figure.
You got to practice first.
Yes.
One other.
There are no training wheels, as you can see.
I can handle it, I think. So.
Yeah, that might be a category A
That might be
or
a
Z. One other thing that I wanted to ask was regards to training these subcontractors that might not be familiar with roads that they're assigned to. Are they going to be required to go out when there isn't any snow and learn their routes and be responsible for making sure that they go down the right
Yes.
way and whatnot?
Yes, we meet with them, go over the routes, explain the route and any details. Each route has their own little idiosyncrasies, and that's going to be helped tremendously by the GPS as well, because the inspectors will have that right there as they're talking to those contractors, and we interview them. We look at their equipment, make sure they're going to be ready to roll, and they understand exactly what they're expected to do.
Great. That's great. Anyone else? Councilor Jim Crocker, before you leave, I'd like to read item 2016-043 and act on that, please, before Dan Santos leaves. Page 7.
Yes, Madam President. New business may be acted upon. 2016-43, approval of the fiscal year 2016 snow and ice overdraft order. Ordered that pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 31D Mass General Laws, which provides the ability of the town to incur the liability to make expenditures for any fiscal year in excess of the appropriation for snow and ice removal. The town council approves expenditures in excess of the available appropriation for snow and ice removal for fiscal 2016, subject to further approval by the town manager, as drafted.
Thank you. Okay.
As you know, it is customary to approve an overdraft authorization, usually in November, to ensure that our snow and ice operations are not interrupted or suspended as a result of financial situation when the amount of the contained in the regular appropriation for this purpose is expended. For 2016, the town appropriated $600,000 for this purpose. Approval of this item will allow the Department of Public Works to exceed the FY16 appropriation if necessary. Any excess amount expended in FY16 will be included in the FY17 operating budget. In 2015, the total expended was $3,201,786, of which approximately $1,849,000 was spent on contractors. Thank you.
Any councilor discussion? Vice President Kennedy.
For the information of the public, there is an explanation as to why we don't ask for $3.2 million now, and we just asked for the minimum amount. Could you go through that for the interest of the public?
Well, I'd love to invite the Finance Director Milne to address that with you all, as he's the best able to articulate that.
Thank you. Good evening. Mark Milne, Director of Finance. We don't know how much we're going to spend. So we take the approach, as all communities in Massachusetts do, is you give DPW what they need to do the job, and then we find out how much that costs, and we put that in our budget the following year. So that's the way we do it.
So they're always operating a year behind.
Yes, this is the one area of government where we are allowed to do that, and for that reason, because of its unpredictability.
Is there another reason that sometimes we get reimbursements for these expenses?
And that's a good point, because sometimes we will get reimbursements, and reimbursements will reduce the amount that we need to raise the following year. However, we have not received anything as of yet for Juneau, but it's in the works. It will be coming soon, we're told.
Okay, thank you.
Before you leave, Mark, how long has $600,000 been appropriated for this amount? How long have we been
I
working on
think
that?
we've been at that level for about 6 years now.
Okay. Any thought about maybe increasing it to 800,000 or?
We could raise it to $2 million. We're still going to come to you and ask you for the authorization to spend more than $2 million if we have to, because last year was a perfect example.
Sure. Okay. All right. Councilor Cushing, I think you had a question.
Yes, just a brief question. I think this is for Dan, but I was interested that of the $3.2 million, 58% was for contractors. And is that typical? Would we expect to see around 50% of our costs going to contractors, regardless of whether it's 3.2 or
Yes.
100,000 or
Yes.
600,000? Okay. And would we expect that expense to go down with the implementation of a GPS system? Or is it hard to tell based on?
Probably not with the contractors, because it's what time they're putting into it and for what it takes to do the roads. We'll know when they're done. We'll be able to keep better track on them, and that when the roads are done, they're done, and that we don't have to go out and look for them or worry about them not letting us know they're done. Not that they would do that, but there's better management, and that might result in some savings there, but I think it'll probably be approximately the same.
Okay, yeah, it seems like one of the nice consequences of a GPS system would be more efficiency. One would hope that therefore with more efficiency, you would have less time on the roads, therefore you would have less billable time so it might be interesting to look at that.
Right. I hope that's the
I love a
case.
good piece of data, so, okay, thank you.
Any other councilor questions? Councilor James Crocker.
Through you, to Mark Milne, as I can again. We had great discussions about what would and wouldn't be included in the Juneau emergency criteria. And the money that you believe that's coming our way is after it's been adjusted for what they deem appropriate for the Juneau charge. And how would you take it in, and how does it show up on our books?
It would be brought into the general fund and just close out to our fund balance, increasing our reserves.
Okay. But we are in agreement now of what we're expecting, because there is no more give and take about what met the criteria of the emergency issue.
Actually, I believe, I just received a phone call from Ann Spillane in the police department, and
Yes.
she said there is some questions about some of the costs that we've submitted for, but we are going to provide them any documentation that they need to resolve that.
It's unbelievable. I mean, you can plan for the money and it's coming 14 months later. Okay, I get that. But for them not to clarify that all the money's been, all the questions have been answered, so that we should suspect that that amount of money's coming back is very disappointing. So I applaud you guys for staying on top of it.
Any other questions? Ma'am, all those in favor of moving the question? And that's unanimous. This item 2016-043, approved fiscal year 2016 snow and ice overdraft order. All those in favor of this item? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much for your presentation. And welcome, Amanda.